Well, Nvidia has delivered yet another strong quarter. Much of its success depends on just a handful of companies. Last February, Nvidia said a single customer had accounted for 19% of its total revenue in fiscal 2024. Joining us now is Ali Mogharabi, WestEnd Capital Management Senior Equity Analyst. Good to see you. And we're learning in this past cycle that the company got 50% of its data center revenue from large cloud service providers, the so-called hyperscalers. Ali, where are we? You know, we know all the big amounts that those companies have pledged to build out their data centers. Where are we in that sort of spending cycle?
Well, it depends, right? In terms of the overall spending cycle, I think we're still far from the peak. But in terms of NVIDIA, I mean, there might be some questions because some of these hyperscalers have invested heavily in their own chips. However, you know, based on the Q4 numbers and also on the guidance, it seems like the demand for Blackwell, their latest one, is very, very strong. And one can only assume that actually is coming from the hyperscalers. So I think for the time being, the hyperscalers continue to look to purchase the NVIDIA GPUs.
You know, looking farther out, Ali, sometimes we ask these analysts who cover the stock, what's the competitive risk to Jensen Huang's company? They don't mention AMD, they don't mention Intel. It's interesting they'll mention Jensen Huang's own customers, those hyperscalers, as a potential competitive threat down the road. Is that how you see it?
That's how we're seeing it, especially with two of the hyperscalers, the Alphabet, the Google Cloud, and also Amazon, so AWS. They have actually been utilizing their own chips, their in-house chips, for a long time, especially Google. So and it also depends in terms of how much they can convince their clients, and I'm talking about the cloud players, those hyperscalers, how much they can convince their clients to go along with the in-house chips rather than the NVIDIA chips. So that remains to be seen, and that's one of the main questions that we're still trying to answer. But again, based on the guidance that these guys provided, their fiscal Q1 guidance, it looks like that demand for Blackwell, for the NVIDIA GPUs remains very, very strong.
You know, and we've been talking a lot also about the switch, the transition from training to inference in this AI cycle, right? First, the AI, for those who aren't familiar, first it learns, right? And then it uses what it has learned to infer, to basically come up with answers to prompts that you give it, et cetera. The common view being, well, maybe not the common view, the view among some that you don't need all of that power in a Blackwell chip for something like inference. Where are you on that whole question?
I think you still do. However, at the same time, I do think that demand for more customized chips could actually increase. But you still need all of that computing power for a few reasons, right? One is that it's actually a flywheel. So as more inference, more data is generated, and then the training continues. And then the other one is that as inference continues to improve, the application of all of this AI technology widens. So that means through it's going to be available and utilized by more companies on various different apps in various sectors and so forth. So all of that requires more power. It requires more chips. That's the way we're looking.
I want to get your take, too, on this back and forth, speaking of hyperscalers, that we saw about Microsoft. Ali, we had an analyst say they're canceling leases with, private data center operators. That got folks worried, of course, about AI infrastructure growth looking ahead. Microsoft seemed to push back on that. Any thoughts, line of sight there, Ali?
There have been some reports. It's still a little bit unclear, but there have been some reports that some of the cancellations and the lease cancellations may be due to OpenAI looking to utilize some other platforms rather than Microsoft. So the way we're looking at it is that yes, there may be, again, it remains to be seen, but there may be some changes in terms of how Microsoft approaches it. But in terms of the overall demand for chips, and let's include, of course, NVIDIA market-leading GPUs, that remains pretty strong. That hasn't necessarily changed.
Ali, what would you want to know on the call here, like in terms of sort of the implications for the broader universe?
Yeah, it's interesting. The first thing that came to mind, of course, is DeepSeek. We want clarification on that. We want to make sure, of course, that NVIDIA clarifies, what the cost may have been, right? We certainly disagree. I mean, we don't think it was merely 6 million compared to the billions that some of the other, the hyperscalers have spent. So that's one regarding DeepSeek. And then the other one is, while it was good news, high demand for the H20s. I think there was an article published a couple of days ago. That's really good news. But we want to also make sure that the high demand for H20s is not necessarily cannibalizing the potential demand and ongoing demand for Blackwells. Of course, the numbers that they released today and the guidance that they gave doesn't really indicate that, but it'd be great for the management team to actually confirm that.
Ali, sometimes you'll hear an argument from NVIDIA bulls, and they'll say, listen, as long as the hyperscalers, as long as those big cloud giants are spending, and we, listen, you saw that during this earnings season, Ali, you saw the reports, you listened to conference calls, they sure are. Then they say you stick with NVIDIA. In your opinion, is it that simple?
It's becoming a little bit more complicated. I will say, though, that NVIDIA will still be the beneficiary for some time, but it is still becoming a little bit more complicated, mainly because of the in-house chips that they have and some of the other customized chips that others are working on. But again, with NVIDIA's market share currently, and I keep saying the guidance, the top line guidance that they provided, it looks like demand remains very, very strong.
Ali, great to have you. Thanks so much, as always, for your time and insight. Appreciate it.
Not a problem.